I'm based out of New York City. I currently work at a firm called Incandescent. So we're a new startup targeted and trying to understand how to run, create, and build enterprises better. What that actually translates into is into three verticals. One is research, second is advising, and third is venture development. And we try and solve any problems along the lines of business design, organization design, change management, performance management. It's the concept that there are so many businesses out there that are very product or very service focused, but not necessarily coming from the angle of how do you actually manage a company as a whole, or actually trying to create the infrastructure. So that's what I do. My background is slightly different. It's sort of at the intersection of finance and design. So I started off my career on the fixed income desk with the Royal Bank of Canada, and then went on to do debt financing in sub-Saharan Africa, both with Acumen and then with their International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector investment arm of the World Bank. And then somewhere along the way, I co-founded a small startup in New York called the Design Gym, and we're an innovation consultancy that uses design thinking to try and create a community of creative problem solvers. From the sort of financing world lens, I think my biggest discovery is that there's a disconnect between the way that people are going about their day-to-day and what their belief set is. And that translates into the way that money is being managed or the way that they conduct themselves at work. So I think that's one perspective. From the Design Gym perspective, what I see is there's a huge need for creativity in the workplace, for there to be permission to have fun and permission to fail, permission to try out crazy ideas and just really try and see what else can be done in the workplace. And with Incandescent, I think personally, which is the most interesting, is that people often don't take a step back to look at what is the bigger picture and what they're trying to build towards. I think that there's a tendency, and it's normal for everyone to be caught up in the day-to-day and what needs to be done next week, what needs to be done the week after. But that compounding effect of what does it amount to over the year, or what does it amount to over 5 years, and what are we building the foundation for? What is your purpose as an organization is not something that a lot of organizations step back and think about. There's a very specific field of finance which I'm interested in, which is called impact investing. And what impact investing means is that it's essentially investing your money for profit and for purpose, and for good. So, for example, investing in companies that have trying to solve a public good, trying to create some level of social impact within the community. And I think that there is a small movement. I think it's gathering some level of momentum. If you look at a couple of different asset managers or large institutions in the world, Morgan Stanley actually yesterday just announced their new retail fund to retail investors. So all that being said, so this is a new movement that's coming up, and what is happening is that you see there are so many people who intuitively know that this is great, this is a good way to invest in your money, but don't necessarily turn around and apply the same value systems to themselves in the way that they're conducting themselves at work, but also the way that they're managing their own personal money, or if they run a foundation, do that for themselves. So, for example, when I was working with the Royal Bank of Canada, I was working on the fixed income institutional desk. We manage money for a very large foundation in Canada. They're trying to save the environment in Canada because the Arctic is a huge issue there. They're trying to encourage education in different communities, so they're putting their money to good work. So when they come into the meeting, they will say, we want, this is the aim of our foundation. We're trying to accomplish all these things within Canada. Fantastic. But then the next set of conversations will have, okay, great. Well, here's our money. Here are the parameters in terms of what our asset allocation should be. Go crazy. Go invest in whatever you think is best for us. All we care about is the returns. Not knowing that we'll just turn around and say, like, okay, where are the best returns? Which is the nature of the investing business. And say that, okay, let's look at, some sort of level, like a classic bond fund, a classic, like, Canadian equities. But sometimes those companies within those portfolios cancel out the good that they're trying to do on their day-to-day. So if you look at it from a net perspective, it's sort of a cancellation effect that they're trying to do all this good in the world, but maybe they're investing in some Canadian company that's mining in the tar sands of Alberta, which is completely not aligned with their value system. So that's on the institutional level. And on the personal level, there are a lot of people who think that, I do want to do some good with my life. I feel like I need to have more connection with my work. But they don't actually act upon it. And they tolerate it instead of acting upon it. The biggest challenge would probably be this balance of long-term versus short-term results or impact or choice, or I'm going to choose the word impact, long versus short-term impact, where you're an organization and you're trying to move this giant force behind you because you see something 5 years out that you want to do and believe that it will be a good move for the organization, but there are some very near-term impacts that people are reading that, especially if you're a public-facing company, that may not be the best indicators for the long term. So I'll give you a tangible example. I'm a great admirer of Amazon. I think that they have done some phenomenal work, particularly because I think Jeff Bezos is a very long-term futuristic leader. He sees things coming and he moves the marketplace around him in order to make it happen. Obviously, like Amazon, I'm talking about a very extreme example given their large market size and influence in the marketplace. But so, for example, when he saw that there was demand and also had a vision for the Kindle, even before it was out, for this electronic e-reader, and this is even before there was the ability to do Wi-Fi properly on mobile devices. This was even before majority of the books were just starting to be digitized. But he saw that Amazon could be that marketplace to bring together publishers and provide a service to customers. And it was the long game. They agonized through it. I think he describes it in his book, recent Amazon book, which is a phenomenal read, just how he garnered and knew that in order to make this product happen, it was going to be a movement from the publishers and to release those rights to Amazon. It was going to be a hardware problem where he's going to have to find some way of making electronic ink even readable and in that such a thin format, and take into consideration like the construction of the weight and Wi-Fi and all of those elements that went into the very first version of the Kindle. And then there's a consumer side where they're used to normal books. Like, how do you convince people that this is a new way of reading that's even viable in the first place? And there's also a supply side issue where then you, besides these publishers, you still have to go through the task of putting all these books online so that people can purchase them when the Kindle comes out. So it was a lot of like forces that came together, and And I think if you read the actual account of how he pushed his firm and how there were so many doubts, and how the entire marketplace was almost against him to a certain degree, I can imagine that he's not the biggest fan amongst the publishing circles. But it was a phenomenal feat, and an example of something that he saw viable in the long term versus in the short term. What he could have done is just bolstered the book marketplace and just sold that and had more profits, and that would have been all great. But I will point towards two examples of leaders that I personally really admire in what they're trying to do. So one is Reid Hoffman, who's the founder of LinkedIn. And he has just published a book called The Alliance. And he talks about creating alliances in your workforce and place. He talks about it in a very transparent way, in that when you manage talent in the workplace, one is about setting the expectation of you're here, I'm here, we're here to mutually sort of make the company better. Let's have an open discussion of what, like he calls them tours of duty, sort of like when soldiers are deployed to battlefields, you deploy your workers to battlefields as well. So they come in with an understanding of, oh, my tour of duty is a transformational one, or my tour of duty is a rotational one. And he goes through the different definitions, which I think is a very nice way of framing what you're here to do and what your aim is and what the company is here to support you with. So that's one approach, which I think works well according to different settings that you're in. The other approach is a firm called Bridgewater, where the founder is Ray Dalio. Yeah, so Ray Dalio's principles in terms of building a firm, which I think is just testament to how phenomenal Bridgewater is. It's the world's largest hedge fund, but just the way that employees are treated and the way that the culture within Bridgewater really emulates personal development and growth. So pain plus reflection equals progress. And having that very aggressive pursuit of truth, which makes everything very transparent as well. Maybe transparency is the key for both of them. My biggest one would probably be to adopt a mindset and value set of, when I used to work at Acumen, we would call it to have moral imagination. And what that means is, at Acumen is defined as the willingness to challenge the status quo, but understand the world as it is and have the audacity and moral courage to build the world that could be. So is this an acknowledgement of, well, what is reality? But also have the humility and audacity to address the issues at the same time and to hold that sort of value set in tension and in pairs with each other. Wow.